week we'll be going over how to really get the basics down pat with Photoshop. And this will work for versions of Photoshop from CS2 through CS6, as well as Creative Cloud and Photoshop Elements 11 and 12. Okay, and we'll mostly just be going over the tools that I utilize the most, and that you most likely as well will be utilizing the most once you get started with Photoshop. So this is really a guide for those who are just beginning with Photoshop, who haven't used it before. Also, if you've been using Photoshop for a little while, go ahead and stick around. You just might learn something new. Okay, so let's get started. We'll be working with this photograph today. This is my little man. He just turned 1 year old. I know they grow so fast. But so to get started, I'm just going to be utilizing the tools on this left-hand panel here first. If you don't see it, normally it's loaded by default in Photoshop, but you can click on Window and you'll see options to make this panel appear. Okay. Now before I complete any adjustments, I always duplicate my background layer. I never ever make changes on my background layer because I can't go back later and adjust those changes that I had made. So to do that, I'm just going to go to Layer and select Duplicate Layer. You can rename the specific layer. I'm not big on renaming layers unless I'm making an actual action that I can play and adjust later on. So I'll just leave that as is and click OK. All right. So the first tool that I utilize a lot, not necessarily on babies, but a lot of times on newborns, but I'm just going to zoom in and show you here. Notice how I've got my magnifying glass selected. I press the plus sign here, so I can just click on my subject and zoom in as much as I need to. Let's see, let's just go a little bit closer. And it looks like he's got, a few, I don't know what that is, if it's his leftover lunch or maybe a snack right here around his mouth. So I'm just going to remove that from his face. I can do that by clicking on my, let's go ahead and click over here, my spot brush healing tool. If you don't see it, just right click and you'll see a bunch of options. Depending on your version of Photoshop, you may not have all of these options available to you, but you should have the spot healing brush. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Make sure you have content aware selected. And again, your options may be slightly different depending on your version of Photoshop. So I can, I'm not going to be going over real quick here many shortcuts, but one shortcut that I use all the time is for my brush tools. You can use this for your spot healing brush or your regular paintbrush, which I will use later on. You can press your left and right brackets to make your brush smaller or larger depending on how big you need it for the specific job that you're doing. So all I'm doing is clicking where I see little spots on his face, just to clear a few things up here and there, make his face look nice and clean. Okay, so now if I click on my new layer here, if I click on the little eyeball, and you look really closely down underneath his chin and right here by his eye, you'll see the little specks disappear. Okay, so that's a really great tool for clearing up the face. Babies that have baby acne, teenagers, use it on adults even. Just a really great, nice tool to use to clean up the face. Now, if you right-click on your spot healing brush, you can also select the patch tool. I use this a lot as well. And let's see here. Usually, if you find a stray hair, I'm not really going to do too much with his with the hair, but just to kind of show you what this does. Let's see here. What you do is circle around anything on the photograph that you want to remove, click and then drag it to another area of the photograph that has the texture that you wish to replace with in that area. And there we go. That's his little stray hair is now gone. And you can see the before and after. Normally I wouldn't get rid of the stray hair. In this case, I just kind of wanted to show you a little bit that you can do with the patch tool. Remember, that does collect texture to the area that you drag it to. So make sure the area that you're dragging and dropping it to is what you want that the area that you originally had circled to look like. Same with the spot healing brush. It pulls textures from around the area that you're clicking. So it's not always exact. You may end up having to click on the area several times to get that just right. Okay. So I'm going to go in and actually we're going to go in our layers panel here in just a moment. Let's see. I do want to show you the dodge and burn tools. I'm just going to zoom back out on my photograph here. Click fit screen. There we go. Okay. So here's our dodge and burn tools, and you can right click and you'll see the dodge and the burn tool. I also use these quite a bit. I have actually really great actions that do very similar things as the dodge and burn tool. They're just a little bit more advanced. Okay, so for now we're just going to use the Photoshop tools. I'm going to use the burn tool. Okay, the burn tool darkens areas of your photograph. And specifically, you can select shadows if you wish to deepen and darken the shadows. You can select midtones and highlights as well. In this photograph, I have a few blown out highlights, so I'm going to select highlights. And this is the exposure. This is how deep I'm going to, or how dark the brush is going to be. I usually don't start off too high, especially with the burn tool, so I'm just going to keep that right around 30, knowing that I can always change that in a moment. And again, I'm going to duplicate my layer real quick before I make any additional changes. So I've got my skin on this background copy, and I'm going to be doing the burn tool on this background copy. And I'm just going to brush over really lightly here. Again, you can zoom in and be a lot more careful than I am. For time purposes, we're just going to try and breeze through this. I'm going to bring that down to 10% and just go over the white areas that I'm seeing on his clothing. There we go. So notice the before and after. I was able to bring back some detail in his shirt that wasn't there before. And if you feel it's too much, each layer, adjustment layer, has an opacity in itself. Right here's the opacity. And I can click on that and bring the opacity down to where I think it looks best. Keep that right around 90%. If you don't see your layers panel or your adjustments panel, again, click on window and you will have an option to have that appear in your window panel. Okay. Now moving on, I know we had talked about the dodge tool. This photo is pretty bright already. I don't have any use for it here, but I do use the dodge tool sometimes if I wish to lighten or contour an area. It's a really great tool to have. Okay, so now I'm going to click on my layer panel and go down to new adjustment layer. Here I have a whole bunch of different options I can click on to make changes to my photograph. Now your options will be different than mine depending on which version of Photoshop you have. Again, we'll be going over mostly the options that are available in the versions of Photoshop that I mentioned earlier. Now before we go to new adjustment layer, if you click on image and go to adjustments, you see pretty much the same adjustments here. You don't want to click on image and adjustments and make your adjustments here, because it's not going to give you a new adjustment layer. It's just going to keep piling on those effects onto one layer. And again, it'll be harder to go back later on and make changes if you decide to change a few of the adjustments that you had made a little while back. Okay, so we're not going to do that. We're going to click on layer, new adjustment layer. The first thing I'm going to click on is brightness contrast. And again, I'm not going to rename it. You can. Notice how I've got a new layer here. If I had clicked on image, it would have just applied it to this layer, and again, just kept piling all the changes onto this one layer. which is not a good thing. Okay, so I've got my brightness contrast clicked here, and I've got some options to brighten my photo, which I definitely don't want to do. Again, this photo is bright enough as it is already. I can darken it a bit if I wish to. I'm just going to keep it as is. Keep in mind, this is a RAW file. You can shoot either in RAW or JPEG. RAW files are wonderful because you have a lot more flexibility with them when loading them into Photoshop later on and editing your photograph. So I always shoot in RAW. However, you do have to remember when shooting in RAW that RAW files do not come out of the camera with the same contrast and color that your JPEGs have. Okay, so you have to add that back in later on through editing. So I'm just going to click on contrast. I'm going to bring the contrast up a bit in this photograph. Now, if you're not sure what your photograph had looked like before adding the contrast, you can click on this little eyeball with the arrow, and it'll show you the before. Let go, and you can see the after. Okay. Now, a little bit goes a long way, so I'm just going to keep it right there. And again, if I decide I don't like that later on, I can just change the opacity of the layer and bring that contrast up or down, or I can just turn off the eyeball and remove it altogether. I could click it and drag it in the trash can if I decide later on that I don't want that. So I'm going to click on layer again, new adjustment layer. This time we're going to click on levels. Click OK. With the levels, there's a bunch of more advanced things you can do with the sliders. Notice how the darks are getting darker here, lights are getting lighter here. Again, there's a lot of different options. You can lighten the shadows, darken the highlights here. But really, since we're just beginning with Photoshop here in this tutorial, I want you to select the presets. There's a lot of different preloaded presets that you can play with. You can click on darker. Notice how the photograph just got a little bit darker. Again, I can click on that little eyeball here to see the before and then the after. I can click on light and shadows. Now that obviously is quite a bit. So this isn't custom. It's all just different settings that you can click on and see what that does to your specific photograph. Okay, so a lot of different things to play with here. Let's see. I am going to click on darker. I like the little slight change that brings to my photograph. There we go. Okay, so moving on, I'm going to click on layer again, and we are going to go down to hue saturation. Okay. Now I can bring up my saturation. Again, a lot of times with the raw files, not always, you won't always have to bring the saturation up, but a lot of times I find myself having to do that. So I'm just going to bring it up +5. A little bit really goes a long way. Okay, and notice here you also have the option to either lighten or darken your photograph. There's a lot of different ways to do that in Photoshop. I really like using the levels tool that we had just gone over previously. So I'm going to keep that at 0. There we go. Okay, so going back to the layer panel, we're going to go to one more option, and that is actually 2 more options. Let's cover black and white really quickly. Okay. Okay, so obviously here I have my standard black and white. I just converted my image. And then you have your little sliders. Okay. I usually play with reds and yellows the most because those affect your skin tones. Notice if I slide the reds to the right, his skin is getting lighter. Now in this image, because it is so light already, I don't necessarily want to do that or I'm going to lose his skin. So I'm just going to bring that down a little bit actually, and notice with the yellows as well. Now you're seeing it affect the background, but also his skin. Okay, so I can move that around, and this really helps with contouring your black and white image. This one didn't have too many greens in it, but notice how a few things are getting darker here when I slide it to the left, and the blues are affecting my my skies. Okay. So I can really contour and shape an image with these sliders. You can press tint and give your image a tint as well. And there's different tints that you can select. There's the blue filter, green filter. See how drastically that changes your photograph? So there's quite a bit that you can play with here with the black and whites. Okay, now I don't want to keep this image black and white, so I'm going to take that and drag it to the trash can. Okay, one more time here, guys. I'm going to go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and Photo Filter. Okay, there we go. And here I have a bunch of different, again, preloaded filters that I can use. Normally I use these to warm my photograph. This really helps with white balance. If you didn't get that right in camera, you can go back and warm up your photograph, or if it's too warm, you can cool it down by selecting a cooling filter. Obviously this photo was not too warm because it looks very blue here. And keep in mind, you can always change the opacity, make it even cooler, or take that opacity down quite a bit. I believe it starts at 25% there. So there's a bunch of different filters that you can play around with. There's deep red. I am going to select the warming filter for this one. And I'm just going to bring it up to about 10%. Again, a little bit really goes a long way here. And I'm going to exit out. Okay. Now, again, later on, if I decide, there might be, too much contrast, it might be too dark. I really like how it looks right now, but I could just turn the little eyeball off on each layer and see what that layer is doing to affect my photograph, and I can change it from there. Okay, so all these little layers for each change that we're making are really great to have. Okay, so once you go in and make changes, adding color and finishing effects for photographs is one of my specialties. I love to do that. So I'm going to finish off my photograph and run to actions. First, I'm going to run Pish Posh from the Bee's Knees Work Light set. I'm going to press play. And notice how I've got a bunch of different adjustment layers in this action. And I'm going to click the little eyeball, and you can see the difference that's bringing to my photograph. Now, with all of my actions, you can adjust the opacity and bring down the effect to where you need it to be. So I just wanted to add a little bit of a color pop, and that's exactly what I'm getting here with this specific action. I'm going to keep it here at 35%, and I would like to deepen my photograph a little bit. Last, I'm going to run Delightful. Okay, now that's a little bit dark, so again, I'm going to use my opacity slider and keep that right around 25%. Now here's where I'm going to show you the brush tool that I also use quite a bit. If you don't see it, just right click, and you probably had one of these other tools selected. So we want the brush tool. Notice how I have my layer mask selected, which is the little white box beside this action. With the adjustment layers, it's automatically built in as well with all the adjustments that we made previously. So you can do this with an action or a specific adjustment. Okay. Now I want to take the darkness off of his skin that appeared through this Delightful action. I don't want his skin to darken, just everything around him. Okay. So with adjustment layers, always remember that white reveals and black conceals. Okay, so this entire effect has been revealed. I want to conceal it over his skin tones. So I've got my brush selected. I've got black as my foreground color. You can select these little arrows to move between black and white, or the two smaller squares here to reset your colors. Okay, you also want a soft brush. So see how these brushes here have a really hard edge? And notice how these are softer. I always have a soft brush selected. Okay, so again, I'm going to use my brackets to resize. Normally I would zoom in and be very careful, but just for time purposes, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to adjust the opacity to about 80%. I want to get most of this action off of his skin tones. All right, and notice how the black is appearing over here on my white square. That means that's where I'm removing the specific color. of this action. There we go. So again, I'm not being too perfect. I'm just really quick wiping that off of his skin. There we go. So there's our before and after. Notice his skin tones aren't getting too much darker here. And one last thing that I will do with my photographs is sharpen them. Sharpening is so important. It's something that I do on 100% of my photographs. Even for print, I know there's definitely a standard procedure for sharpening for Facebook and other social media platforms, but you really do want to sharpen your photographs for print as well. Now, of course, you're not going to sharpen it quite as much as you would for web, but to do that, I'm going to go in and, one moment here. I'm going to click on my original, on the top background copy that I've got here, and I'm going to layer duplicate. There we go. You always want to select the top one because if you duplicate the background, it won't have all the changes that you had made on top of it. Okay, so I've got my top background layer copied here, and I'm going to go to Filter. I'm going to select Sharpen and Unsharp Mask. Okay, now this is really handy because it zooms in on the photograph and you can see exactly how much you're sharpening. I'll usually zoom in on the eye or another area of the face that you can see so I can really get a good preview. Now there's the before and the after. Here's where you can really play around with the radius. Notice how deep the photograph is getting now. That's a little bit of over sharpening in my opinion. Okay, so let me just take this down a little bit. I'm going to bring the radius up to about 5%. And you can play with the amount, bring it up. I usually keep mine at about 100. And then again, the threshold, you can play around with that and see how that affects your photograph. The lower it goes, notice how you're getting quite a bit of definition there in the photograph. I'm going to keep that right about at 40. Okay.